one of the key differences between the ego and the soul and God is that the ego is looking to get, whereas the soul and God are looking to give. So when I remember, like, one of my mentors was on stage one time, and he was doing this speech where he was basically saying, like, you know, you guys are all complaining that your mentors don't reach out to you, but the truth is that you are going about it the wrong way, because the way that they're going to reach out to you is not by like you sending a message. It's actually by you showing gratitude. And if you're given something and you neglect it, or you don't open it, you don't use it, then you're showing ingratitude. Whereas if somebody just gave you like one quote, one page of a book, like one small thing to work on, and you took it as if that was the last bit of information that you're ever going to receive, then you'd be so grateful for it and showing that gratitude by your implementation. So I believe that it's one of the most difficult times in order to show gratitude for information right now, because of the unlimited access that people have at their fingertips, you know. All right, welcome back to the show Mo's Flow, where souls grow and hearts glow, and we go deep into subjects that are truly transforming people's lives, right? So I wanted to talk a little bit about today something that's been a bit of an experience for me in leveling up in this particular area, because I really felt as though it was something of which I tackled for a very long time. But the truth of the matter is that the more that I've been scaling my business, the more that I've been growing, the more that I've realized how much there is still to overcome with this, and that is overcoming the ego, the inner ego. Because ultimately, when we're on this journey, we start noticing in others certain flaws, certain faults. And that's what I started to find for myself. Like, I went in my first year of doing business, I went heavy into personal development, and I read like over 100 books, which taught me a lot about the ego. It taught me a lot about human nature, psychology. But whilst doing so, I also built up my ego and was revealing to me more about who I was and the parts of me that still required rooms for growth. So what was happening was I started to notice in others, like, you know, that person seems like they are full of themselves, or they've got maybe narcissistic tendencies, or maybe even the opposite. This person has low self-confidence. But my awareness wasn't necessarily directed inward. My awareness was directed outward. And I feel like this is the journey that most people go on when they are first getting started out, is that initially the last person who you want to point the finger at is going to be yourself. And instead, what we end up doing is, like, we point fingers at everybody else. But whilst we're doing that, if you look at what's going on with your hand, it's like there's literally one finger that's pointed to everybody. There's one thumb that's pointed up to the sky. And then there's three fingers pointed at you. So sometimes what people say is like, based off of a person's character, situation, the reason for why they are the way that they are, or they have what they have, is because of the fact that they are partly responsible. So in relationships, especially, people will be willing to take maybe 50% responsibility. But I actually believe that message there about, the fact that you can point one finger at someone and have three fingers pointed back at you at the same time simultaneously, that's actually calling for you to level up in terms of how much responsibility that you can be aiming for in taking. Because if in every relationship you're aiming for 75%, you're aiming for more than what is the minimum standard. Because truthfully, 50% responsibility in a relationship should be the minimum standard, not 30, 45, anything else. And so if you're only aiming for 50, chances are like you're probably not going to hit 50. You're going to hit 40, 30, and maybe less. So if you start raising our standards and being like, okay, we can start taking 75% responsibility for our relationships, for the situations that we're in, this is when the game really starts to change. And so that's what I personally started to do as much as I possibly can in my experiences, relationships, is sometimes I'll be aiming for 100%. And I'd say that that's an extreme. Okay. You don't want to aim for 100%. And the reason why is because there's actually such a thing as taking too much responsibility for others, taking on too much, because what can then start to happen is you may be enabling some of their behavior in the relationship, which doesn't actually help the person to learn, to grow, to take a look in the mirror and see themselves for all of who they are, faults and their strengths. So if you can actually aim not necessarily for 100% or 50%, but around about 75, I'd say that's the sweet spot. And if everybody did that, imagine, if everyone just went into their relationships and everybody went into circumstances and they were taking 75% responsibility as a minimum standard, where they only were supposed to take 50, then everyone is just going to be taking far more responsibility. And that's going to contribute to us having a culture where there's a lot more ownership that we're taking, as opposed to becoming victims of our circumstances. And I truly believe that when you become that person who is able to take more responsibility, you start reclaiming your power back, because most people right now are totally powerless in this new day and age. And the reason that they're powerless is because they are leaving their reality up to others who have, in their eyes, the responsibility over what ends up happening. So an example of this could be, let's say, for example, you're going into a job, or you're a person who has an employer, and you're basically saying that the reason that the employer hasn't necessarily given you a pay rise isn't because of you, but it's because of them. Like, they're a horrible company, they don't have the opportunities there, and there's bad leadership. So everything is pointed again outside of you, elsewhere. And whilst you do that, there's absolutely nothing that you can do to change your reality if you can only identify those as being the reasons as to why you're in the position that you're in. But it's not necessarily to say that you don't have an awareness of those things to start taking responsibility. But if you can actually look at your own circumstances right now, and you can see that, hang on a second, even though I know that I'm working for an employer that's not the best employer, they're not the best leader, they're not the best at being able to see me for my worth, but what's actually within my control? Because if all we're doing is we're focusing on things that are outside of our control, then it is going to make us feel as though we have no power over our life, which is not true whatsoever. We are the ones who are the creators of our own realities if we want to be. And so when you start looking at yourself, the situation becomes no longer just bad employer, bad leadership, bad at seeing my worth, to now it's, well, maybe I can do something to stand out more. Maybe I can change who I'm going to approach in terms of leadership. Maybe I can take a look at finding a new employer. Like, there's so many different things that you can personally do to create a solution there. But it first requires that you're able to recognize the problem. Because if you can't actually see that you're part of the problem, then that problem is never something that you have control over. I think, we were having a conversation yesterday as well about how this can even correlate to the way that people will heal themselves in their bodies. And the way that I view it is that some people actually believe that they have no power over the way that their body is going to be healthy or sick. So you've got some people who, whenever they become sick, they're like, yeah, this is just part of the way that things are. Like, I must have been born with the bad genetics. I must have been born with like an unhealthy body, and I can't do anything about it. It's just how I am. Whereas then you've got other people who are seeing that they're becoming sick constantly, and they're becoming curious as to why is this happening. Maybe it's something that's going on around me outside of my control, my genetics, etc., my environment, maybe, which you can change sometimes, but we're stuck here on Earth, so you can't exactly get anywhere else as of yet. But what's within your control right now, like, is how you actually respond to the sickness. Are you going to be the type of person that when they become sick, they're just accepting it as like, there's nothing I can do to change this? Or are you going to be the type of person who is going to take ownership? Welcome, Catherine. Good to see you once again. Yeah, you were saying there was something about a glitch yesterday. So is that still happening right now?
Let me check.
Yeah. I don't know. Do I need to speak to test it out, or?
Yeah, no, I think it's working now. I could hear you when I was muted.
Right. Okay, that's
Yeah, yesterday it was like cutting in and out anytime I put you on mute. That's why I had to. There was a lot of background noise sometimes because normally I would just turn off my mic if I was like boiling the kettle or whatever. But I was like, I didn't want to lose the audio, so
to
at
be
least we
honest,
don't have that today.
I didn't actually hear any background noise yesterday, to
Oh,
be
good.
honest.
That's
So
good.
it was all fine, but must have been because I was focused on my own voice rather than what you were sharing. But how did it go last night with the letter?
Um, it was weird. Like I I wrote until like after midnight. But not looking at the time, but I just like, because I did turn off my phone, but I turned it back on just to see what time it was real quick when I was finished. But it was like, I feel like I got somewhere, but then I feel like there was just a real disconnect. And I started, let me actually open my journal. So I started like with a bit of just the context, like forgiveness and the context of what I was revealed on the call. And then I was like, okay, what am I? First of all, I need to identify a few things, like what am I triggered by with my parents? What am I hurt and upset about?
Yeah.
What memories are attached and involved? And then, like, what would my pain say to them about it? That was kind of the question I asked. So, because I was like, I need to get that part out first before I go to the forgiveness part.
Mm.
I guess kind of like a journal version of your experience that happened in real life. Like I was like, get out all the angry whatever stuff. So I started just with my mum.
Yeah.
And then even, like, when I saw her briefly today, I just like, I realized I think the whole experience made me realize, like, how surface level our relationship is,
Mm.
and I don't even know if I want it to be deeper or need it to. I feel like it's just so normal to be surface level connected, but on a deeper level disconnected.
I think it's less about the depth and it's more about the closeness. Because you can be physically close with somebody, but very distant as well.
Mm, yeah,
And you don't have to be having like long, deep conversations with a person in order to experience closeness. You could actually not say anything and be really close with another person.
yeah. I feel like the people I feel the closest to are the people I feel safest being authentic around.
Yeah.
And
Which,
I wouldn't really necessarily put my mum in that category or my
yeah,
dad, to be
which,
honest.
which sounds like there could be a bit of a fear there on your end. So when you're looking for like the triggers, then usually like the lowest energy that you'll have that's anchoring you down and preventing you from being able to be authentic, be yourself, it's going to be fear.
Yeah,
And the the fear that it sounds like is something that it exists within you, and it's been repressed as well as that fear of judgment.
yes, exactly. Judgment is definitely a word that came up. Judgment and just generally like being misunderstood
Yeah,
or not being wholly understood.
yeah. So if you look back at your your life growing up, and you have to see when um, you really felt like you're being judged the most, like when do you feel like that kind of started?
Oh, definitely as a teenager. I don't know. I couldn't. If it started before that, I don't remember.
Hmm.
I
Doesn't
remember it more than like teen years.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be like when you're 2 years old or anything like that, but um, yeah, even as a teenager, these things can really stick with you. So I'll give you what it was like with myself. For me, like I always had a close memory to when I was about 18 years old, and I felt like there was a lot of heightened emotions that I was feeling then. But after doing quite a bit of journaling, I realized that that was actually more so because of what I'd experienced like about 4 or 5 years before that added to the feeling of the wound that I'd experienced. So maybe starting off with just going back to what's most recent is what can unlock the pathway to maybe where the real hurt is as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think I wrote more on although like one of my questions was what memories are attached. I feel like I was just so free flowing that I didn't really come back to that many like specific memories.
Mm.
So I think that would definitely help.
Yeah, because what you're essentially doing is you are going back to reframe and change the story. Because in success, like success is three phases. You have, or not, well, three components, I would say. And I believe that it happens through these phases. So there's your story, your state, and then there's your strategy. So whatever strategy that you're currently choosing is based off of the level of self-worth, self-respect, self-confidence that you have. And all of that is determined by going all the way to the original, which is your story. And if you have an empowering story, then every time that you reflect, every time that you go back, it's not going to feel as though it puts you into a lower state. It's actually going to like awaken something within you, and you'll be operating from a powerful space. So that then changes the state, which makes you want to go for the biggest, best strategy that you possibly could. That's probably the scariest one, but you don't fear the judgment. You don't fear the rejection or whatever it is that's holding you back from going and doing the one thing that you know that if you was to do that more often, that you would be able to truly expand. So the memories are the opportunities for you to elevate your story. And it's about not only becoming conscious of what currently that memory is. So you may have seen the graph, which is showcasing what's called the 4 levels of competence.
Yeah, that rings a bell. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's basically how you move from incompetence to competence. And when you're first when you're first getting started out, it's got to be unconscious incompetence. You don't know what you don't know. And so what it sounds like for yourself is that currently that's actually a little bit as to where you are right now in terms of being able to uncover like what are these blocks inside of you that are holding you back, like emotionally, from being able to truly step into the most powerful, authentic version of who you are. So the level after this is then becoming conscious of the incompetence. Like, what are the memories? What are the stories that are holding you back from really becoming alive? And then what it requires is for you to not just become aware of it, but go back into those emotions and those memories that have been formed, and then start consciously rewriting the story and helping the younger version of yourself, that inner child, like to see things how they should have seen them all the way back then. If your parents did the right thing, if your parents did what would have been needed for you back then. And so I was literally just talking about this before you jumped on as well, about taking responsibility, because whilst we're initially growing up, like we'll point the finger and point the blame at our parents for making us how we are. But whilst you point the finger, like simultaneously, there's 3 fingers that are always pointing back at you. So how I see that is that most people are going to look at a relationship and be like, well, it's 50-50. So they're partly responsible, I'm partly responsible. But I think that that is an irresponsible way of looking at it, because if everybody sees it as 50-50, no one's going to take the lead. Whereas if you start seeing it as, no, there's 3 fingers pointing back at me, not just 2, then you're going to take 75%. And so you take a little bit extra, meaning that you take the first step, you go to the child, you don't let the child come to you, you go to the parent, you seek forgiveness. And so that's what it's about now, is like, even though your parents are partly responsible for the way that your inner child was parented, if you take the 75% responsibility right now, then you can go and start doing some reparenting that should have happened all the way back then, and that is what gives you that power back. And then eventually you reach the mastery level, second nature, and then it's just unconscious competence, which is the highest level that you can attain with this. So there's a lot of room for growth and healing, as to what I can see for yourself right now. And to be honest, like, if you can focus on doing this type of work, then everything else just falls into place. Like I said, with the state, the strategy, you'll just notice how so many people are coming up to you being like, wow, there's just something different about you. And not only that, but you'll be inspiring other people to like make similar changes, and they'll be coming up to you saying, how did you do it? Or they want to do it like you as well. So that's just naturally what will start to transpire. But it begins with becoming conscious of what some of those memories are.
Yeah. Cool. That's my homework for today. When I come off the call, I've got a
Yeah,
couple more things to wrap up at home, but I was definitely like, because it just felt, it got to a point where it was late,
yeah,
but also I feel like the discomfort of it is like really calling me back, like
from going.
calling me back to the journal. Like I have to, like it's a process that needs to be continued because it was so uncomfortable.
Mm,
Um, and I can see why I've kind of avoided it for so long,
yeah,
because it's it's not comfortable. But then, like, nothing in life is particularly comfortable right now at this stage of motherhood and everything else. So it's like, if sitting in that discomfort can pave the way for, greater peace and more flow, then it's gonna it's gonna be perfect timing. It's needed.
yeah, yeah. And the thing is it's like, um, as you said, the pain of being a mother, the pain of um, everything else that you've gone through compared to this inner work, it's really interesting because um, it's just such a different type of pain that we're talking about. And um, I tend to find, like, men especially, they find this just too painful to even consider most of the time. Um, and part of that reason is because men have actually made to withstand physical pain, whereas women can withstand a lot more internal pain. And that's evident by how, you go back in history, and men would have to go and fight and hunt and be the protectors. But with women, like, they literally had to go through childbirth. So that's a lot more internal pain. And that's why I feel like, with going through this inner transformation, like, you actually find that it's not something that you can't withstand. It's just more so difficult to even allow for the ego, which is protecting its own identity, to surrender.
Mm,
And whilst the ego is protecting its identity, it won't even allow for you to pass through the gate of which you have all the memories stored within there, that's going to allow for you to really heal. So this is the battle that you're overcoming right now. Like, it's your real self, your God self, your higher self, versus this ego self. And a lot of this is about being able to learn more about what the ego does so that you can understand the way that it might sabotage you being able to go through this healing, because it will happen. For some people, like you were saying, that sabotage can come in the form of procrastination. For me, what was happening was my pattern that existed anytime that I would be triggered. I wouldn't actually have an outburst. I'd have like an internal burst, and I'd then start processing it within. I would withdraw from people, and I would just like start doing busy work. So
that's me. I definitely see myself in that part of what you said.
Yeah. So I created this this workbook that I call the Neuro Sovereignty Workbook, and basically what it does is it has like all the different patterns that you might be experiencing that will really make it become evident as to like when your ego is taking over versus when you're operating from a place of your real authenticity and real love.
Did you say neuro sovereignty?
Yeah.
That's so cool. I just wanted to make sure I heard it correctly. That sounds dope. Carry on.
Yeah, thank you. And it's as it says on the tin. The idea is that once you've been able to really heal, like you end up getting your sovereignty back within, and it's no longer the ego who has the authority within and is taking control, but it's actually like you've got God, you've got love, you've got truth. There's the one that's the captain, and that's the first stage, is like recognizing where the ego is when it's showing up, because the way to overcome the ego is not necessarily by force, is what I would say. If you try to attack the ego with force, it will defend and will not let you in. But it's more about being able to take it from the approach of being able to actually serve the ego to some degree, because a big part of the problem that a lot of spiritual people have is that they talk about you having to dissolve the ego, having to get rid of the ego, which makes the ego feel like it's at threat. So it's never going to want to back down. It's always going to want to be the one that's in control. And so instead of trying to get rid of it, it's actually more about helping the ego to become transparent, to become translucent. Because when that happens, then you essentially gain access to the divine power that flows through you and can flow through the ego. But the ego is going to want to be seen and safe and all of those things. So it's almost like being able to persuade the ego is the best way I can put this. And so that's another really good exercise that you can do, is rather than talking just to like your mom, your father, whoever it is, you can start talking to the ego that exists within. And if you think about what that ego really represents, the ego represents the protector that was made at the time of which you'd experienced some form of trauma. And it actually would have been helpful back then for that ego to have been created so that it could perpetuate survival. But the problem with the ego being in control is that your highest potential is only ever going to be survival. And survival is always going to be hustle. It's always going to be going uphill. It's always going to be, selfish and self-preserving. It's never going to be expansive. It's never going to be thriving. It's never going to go into that like place of abundance. Or if it does, then it's going to bring you right back down. So this is what it is. It's like you can never get rid of that ego once it's been formed, but you can get it on side. And when you have it on your own side, then it's winning. And the best way I can look at it is, it's like, I don't know, have you ever seen the Avatar movie, the Blue People?
Yes.
Yeah. So like one of my favorite scenes in that movie is when he has to demonstrate that he's worthy of being in their tribe. And they said that there's this ancient tale where if someone is able to ride, like, I think they call it the Rukmakto, which is this dragon.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like no one touches that dragon. Everyone stays away from it, but all of them are scary. And one day he just glides on it, comes into the tribe, and they're all like, whoa, how did you do that? And they respect him as the number one guy. But what it represents is the overcoming of the ego, and then how powerful you can become, which is related to how big that ego was. So if the ego is the biggest and you can overcome that and you have it on your side, like, you've essentially got that massive dragon that is also walking with you. If you're somebody who has like a really small ego, like a tiny little baby dragon, then it might be easier for you to overcome your ego, but you just won't be as powerful. And I also believe that there's not just like one ego that exists inside of us. I think that there's multiple. So yeah, maybe at first you'll be overcoming like a little ego, gain some power. But then there's like the big boss that you've got to overcome. And once you've got that one, then that's how you become the most powerful.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Mm.
It's like the idea of aiming to destroy the ego has never really like resonated with me anyway, because I feel like you do need it for something, like even like the protection part as well, but also even like the formation of your identity. The ego does play a role in that. And
Yeah.
if you were to completely dismantle it, something would be missing.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of what I've always felt. So it's all about like kind of refining your relationship to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, make it feel special, serve a purpose, but don't say that like we're going to have to get rid of you, because if that then happens, it's going to put up a fight. And that fight can look sometimes as being something that is morally right, but it's not truly the highest level that a person can approach. So an example of this was like, I really saw how sometimes my ego, when I would default and then have these patterns take over, would be that I'd go towards martyrdom and being overly giving, overly selfless. So when when somebody is saying like, "Oh, your problem is that you're too generous," it doesn't really come across as being that much of a problem. But it's actually the ego that is doing that, because it actually quietly creates resentment and ends up having you create a story where you still operate as a victim, and other people are taken from you and things like that. So what I'm basically saying is that sometimes it actually feels like you might be doing something that appears to society as being a good thing, a kind thing, but if it's coming from that place of ego, then it's it's not as kind as it appears. So yeah, I personally believe that a lot of it is about purifying your heart and purifying your intention. Because if you do have ego that is still within you, then it's not a disease of your head, it's not a disease of your body, but it's a disease of your heart. And personally, I believe that the majority of diseases that exist within the heart can actually be overcome through love. So this is the question, is that if love was to have a conversation with the ego, what would love say? And I'm not sure if you have like read any books that are like spiritual books or anything like that, but there's some really good ones where it actually like shows what a conversation would actually sound like. Some of my favorite ones that I started off with, one of my favorite ones I read initially was a book called Conversations with God. I'm not sure if you've heard of that before.
I haven't read it, but I have heard of it. Yeah.
That's one of my favorites of all time, which is essentially the ego speaking to love, them having a dialogue. And what I love about that conversation is that you can literally see how love is never trying to manipulate. It's never trying to fight, destroy, or anything like that. But it's just doing what love would do and helping the ego come to the realization that there's a better way. So that's one good book. Another good one is have you ever heard of the book? It's a more recent one. It's called The Courage to Be Disliked.
No, I haven't.
Yeah. So that one's a little bit similar, not depicted in a way which is about the spiritual, but it's like literally two people having a conversation, and it's another good way that you can see a higher conscious entity operating with another one and having that conversation. And then most recently I've actually been reading, and I've not finished this, but I feel like this is another good one that really helps to break down the way that the ego truly works. It's a bit more difficult to read, so you kind of have to ponder on and meditate on a lot of what's been spoken about. But that's you might have heard of the poet called Rumi.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he has a few books, and there's, I think his most famous one, I've forgotten what it's called, but that's one that I've been reading. And like it's basically all about how ego can show up in so many different ways. And what I love about the way that he puts it across is just in a way that's very symbolic. So a bit like what I did with the Avatar story, like he really is able to make it visually vivid. So that's a good one. There's another one that's I think more popular, more recent, new age. If you've heard of Eckhart Tolle and The Power of Now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I've not read that in a long time, but I remember that was one that spoke a lot about the ego in there as well. So yeah, those are a few good ones that like kind of help you understand a little bit more as to what the ego is doing, what it's saying, and how you can speak to it. But it's almost as if you've got to have a conversation back and forth within. So a lot of people look at themselves and they see themselves as just one personality, one entity, one being, one energy. But really, there's this divine dichotomy that exists within. And it's about you being able to have a good quality conversation of which can help you to bring yourself to having unity within and oneness. Because when that happens, it's like, again, like that Avatar scene, dragon forming with the rider and the so
Oh yeah,
yeah,
because they connect the tail to the hair.
yeah, yeah. See, these movies, like they know what they're doing. They know
Yeah.
what they're doing. There's a reason for why they're so popular as well. Like the ones that are really popular are usually the most popular because they have the most truth within them.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. I think I have The Power of Now on my Audible, but I don't think I actually made it to the end of it. Definitely want to revisit.
What I tend to find is that with quite a few of these books, like maybe when you pick it up initially, you weren't ready for it
Yeah,
as who you
like I went as deep
and
as I was okay to go, and then I was like got distracted at the right time
yeah,
and moved on
yeah,
to
or
something else.
you might be reading it for the ego. You might like that. That was my thing. I went through my first year of reading like almost 100 books, and I was reading it to get to the end of it. I wasn't reading it for it to like actually get through to me. So
Yeah, I think I did that with Joe Dispenza. I was like, I read it because I felt like I would feel like, yeah, I've read Joe Dispenza now. Like rather than actually integrating it as much at the time.
that was me. That was me because I remember that was one of the first books that I read. I saw that somebody else read it, so I was like, "Here's the best way I can describe it is um, when you are reading the book and it's because somebody else has just told you to read it, then the reason why you're reading it is usually because of what it can give you, but not because of what you can give it. And most people are reading for the benefits, but not reading for the love, not reading for it to actually like be something that they would just be wanting to learn themselves, like, and really go study it. Because the difference between just learning versus studying is that if you're going to learn something, then you may have the knowledge of it and you can say it to somebody else. You can regurgitate the information. Most of the education system has primed children to have lots of knowledge. So they're able to write out answers in tests based off of memory. And the intelligence that is actually rewarded and seen as being what makes you intelligent in school, and that's based off of a flawed education system from back in the industrial age, which hasn't changed. So the thing about intelligence is that there's different markers of intelligence, and just being able to take in information and have the knowledge of it is one of the lowest levels. The higher levels of intelligence is where you move towards understanding and wisdom. And understanding is where you actually know the reasons behind all the rules that have been given, and the facts that are stated. But then the highest level is wisdom, where it's actually embodied. So the difference between the one that's just reading versus the one that's studying is that if you're just learning and you can spit out what's been said, then you only have the accumulation of truth. You don't have the application of truth. And when you're studying, it's like you're studying to show that you have and embodied the principles. And every time that you read a page, you read a chapter, like you're not trying to just get to the end of it. You're trying to apply what's been given as much as possible. So when I first started out, like I was reading lots and lots and lots and applying nothing. And now it's like I'm reading barely anything, but everything that I take, I'm applying. So it might just be one page, apply all that, see how it works, refine, test, and then continue moving forwards. Because otherwise you end up getting stuck in this perpetual loop of learning, but not actually doing anything, not actually implementing the changes that you've made. So I feel like that's one of the things about the ego, is that the ego will want to say that I know everything, I know it all. And what humility will say is, I know nothing, and how I learn is by applying.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It made me think of like my um holistic health studies. Like when I did nutrition, it was just an online course where you just have to study a module and pass a multiple choice test at the end. And
Yeah.
it had a lot of like good resources and stuff, but then like I had this like new shiny certificate and like no idea how to actually work with people.
Mm.
Whereas like when I studied herbal medicine, we had to have 500 hours clinical experience to qualify. Not literally 500 hours one to one with patients, but like it covered running the dispensary, it covered um, sitting in on other people's stuff and observing. So when I graduated, it made sense to just go straight into practice because I had already kind of been doing it. I think my problem now with that is that I'm still, I guess maybe it's not a problem that I'm still approaching everything like a student because you should always approach everything like a student. But
Like a scientist is what I would say. That's what you
yeah,
are approaching.
but yeah, just yeah, with the knowledge versus like applied wisdom thing, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah. Because again, like one of the key differences between the ego and the soul and God is that the ego is looking to get, whereas the soul and God looking to give. So when I remember like one of my mentors was on stage one time and he was doing this speech where he was basically saying like, you guys are all complaining your mentors don't reach out to you, but the truth is that you are going about it the wrong way, because the way that they're going to reach out to you is not by like you sending a message. It's actually by you showing gratitude. And if you're given something and you neglect it, or you don't open it, you don't use it, then you're showing ingratitude. Whereas if somebody just gave you like one quote, one page of a book, like one small thing to work on, and you took it as if that was the last bit of information that you're ever going to receive, then you'd be so grateful for it, and showing that gratitude by your implementation. So I believe that it's one of the most difficult times in order to show gratitude for information right now, because of the unlimited access that people have at their fingertips. You can literally go on ChatGPT, you can go on Google, you can go on YouTube. Information is abundant right now. So people will show that ingratitude because anytime they're given it, they're like, well, I don't need to apply it because it's not the last piece of information that I'm going to get. I'm going to get some the day after. And I'm just going to keep getting it. But the more that we do show gratitude for what we're given by giving thanks and not just saying thank you, because that's not like the highest level of gratitude. There's intellectual gratitude, and then there's emotional gratitude. So when you receive it, like you will, if you have emotional gratitude, like you'll really feel grateful for what's been given. And then there's embodied gratitude. And that embodied gratitude is when you have been able to surrender your ego and be like, nope, this is something that I'm too big for. It's not something that's beneath me. No, this is something that I can apply, and I can apply like right now. Because that's another thing that the ego will do. The ego will say, well, there's 1,000 other things that's way more important to do right now. So let me just put that stuff one side, and that ends up becoming something that's neglected. So yeah, I'd say, as I said, like with love being one of the antidotes to the ego, I'd say gratitude and having the intention to give is another one.
Yeah. Did you say having the intention to forgive?
To give,
Oh,
but
to
in
give.
forgiving, there's giving too.
Yeah.
Because you're giving to yourself, you're giving to the other person when you forgive. It's forgiving. That's what forgiveness is.
Mm-hmm.
It's not for taking. It's forgiving.
Yeah, you can see how easily like being stuck in survival and lack can disrupt that pure intention.
Yeah. How do you mean?
Because when I'm just thinking of like myself, maybe like a year ago, I think like not that my finances are like 1,000% in order right now, but I'm in a much better place.
Yeah.
And I feel like everything, although another like aspect of the ego is like, how do you feel about financial reward? Like you might think of like not there's the whole program that we've all been subjected to, like that you should just be content with like whatever you have, and you shouldn't try to get more, and you should, all that kind of thing. And then there's also the flip side where like your birthright is abundance, but then you're in like the earthly plane of your reality, you're stuck in lack. So when you get really stuck in that, you will just be thinking about how are you going to gain, and it can potentially become challenging to shift the mind towards giving because you feel like you actually don't have anything. So what pot do you have to give from? Like, what cup do you have to pour from, kind of thing. But whereas if you're in a situation where you're, like, stable and provided for, giving is just such a natural part of our nature, like, it's who we are, like, I think it is anyway. Like, if you look at children, how they interact with each other, they don't have any of the worries that we have as adults or any of the, um, programs of, like, needing and wanting and, striving for things or battling against things. They just, um, they have something cool and they wanna show it to the next person or they wanna play with it with the next person. They don't wanna keep it to themselves. It's not a natural way of being.
Mm. Yeah. So do you mean that like on the one side you've got people who they are in lack and scarcity, and they're saying that you should be in lack and scarcity because you should be content with what you have.
Um, yeah, I think, well, not necessarily complete lack and scarcity, but, like, just, if you have, like, the bare minimum, like a roof over your head, you have food, you have clothes, like that you should be content with that. I don't know if that's, like, partly a religious program kind of, ideology that comes through from, what's it called? The Protestant work ethic. My dad always used to talk about that, like
What's
how,
that?
it's like, I'm gonna be like, massively paraphrasing and probably not do it justice, but it's like, basically, like, the way religion was used to, kind of condition people into accepting a life of servitude to the system, relative poverty, and your reward is gonna be in heaven,
Hmm.
kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, so it's like, I don't know, like a false sense of contentment, I guess, or um, um, a, like, projected form of contentment that people have accepted from outside themselves.
Yeah. I think another word for it is fatalism, or not
I'm not
necessarily
familiar.
fatalism, but it's is it fatalism or is it nihilism? Yeah, nihilism. So it's the belief that life itself is meaningless, and more so because this life is not significant compared to the afterlife. Um, so then they just kind of treat it as, well, if we're not rich here, that it's fine because we're gonna have like heaven in the afterlife and we'll be good there.
Oh, okay, got you.
Yeah. So I also have grown up in a very religious family, and they have got a lot of these limiting beliefs that they're not aware of, but have governed, the way that they live. Um, and a lot of this was also within my subconscious for a very long time as well, and maybe some of it still is. But it's been enlightening to wake up to just the truth of how what they were sharing as reasons for why you shouldn't have abundance were completely twisted. And it was through a lack of understanding that they weren't able to embody what the message really was about, because people would be able to quote things from the Bible. Like, one of them that stands out for me is, the love of money is the root of all evil. If that's something that is in a book that, you know, you 100% see as being God's word, then you can't argue with it. But if your understanding of it is not what it actually was supposed to be comprehended as, then that could be really limiting for you. And it was for a while for me as well. Only up until very recently has my belief shifted around that. And the problem with the understanding that I had about it was that it was almost as if I just wasn't reading it as to what it was saying, because I'd been told so many times of this lie that said money is the root of all evil. So it's funny, because when you take things out of context in the Bible, like literally just missing out 2-3 words, it's still got that quote, money is the root of all evil. It does say that, but there's some stuff that it says before. So if you just see that money is the root of all evil, then you are going to want to demonize it. You're going to feel guilty holding it. And you'll feel like it's either that you've got to be pious or you're going to be wealthy. You got to choose one or the other. You can't have both divinity and also wealth and success, which is, to be honest, what I see a lot of in the world right now, like where people almost feel as though if they're going to take the road of chasing everything that the world has to offer, then they have to sell their soul to the devil and do things in such a way which is corrupt. It's not going to be making the world a better place and things like that. But that's because that they don't have these understandings of what like the real message is. Because what it's saying in that quote is that it's the love of money that is the root of all evil. And the most significant thing that it's saying there is it's talking about the love. And you could actually replace money with like so many different things. It doesn't even have to be money in that sentence. It could be money. It could be cars. It could be women. It could be men. It could be anything that is like a physical, worldly thing. Because what it's actually saying is that the love of possessions, egoic possessions, is the root of all evil. And even when you look at the word evil, it also has the letters for the word live inside of it. So I believe that when the Bible is talking about things that are evil, it's talking about things that are going to make it more difficult for you to really be alive. And with the love of money being the root of you being spiritually dead in a world where you may be physically alive, what it's really sharing is the biggest problem that people make, which is where they direct their love. So everybody has love that exists within, but it's about where you direct it that can actually be of service to you and help you and other people, or it can be the demise. Now, if you're not going to love money or you're not going to love things, what's the best thing to love? And the best way to put it is that most people are loving the reflection, but they're not loving the actual the thing itself that they want to be. And if they knew what the thing itself was, They think they were so foolish to love the reflection. It's like loving a person's shadow versus loving the person itself. So money, things, everything like this that exists in the world, from the world, is just the reflection of what you want to actually love. And that is to love itself. And when that happens, like, the reverse is also now true, which is the love of love is the root of all goodness. And the result of that is going to be, if you direct your love in that particular way, then you'll still be given everything that you desired, but the desire itself is now not necessarily to go and be obedient to God or go and be a good person to get those things, because that's again from an ego place. But it's going to be go and have the pure intention of loving and serving love and God. And then from that, naturally what's going to happen is that you'll be provided for from abundance.